Hello, Internet! Welcome to episode 245 of the Assorted Calibers podcast, the Second Amendment podcast. There's a little bit for everyone. I'm Weer'd is the most wonderful hostess in the entire universe, Erin Paulette. How you doing, Erin?
You know, we started jerking around like an hour ago. We're finally getting started.
I mean, if you listen to the blooper reels, you'll understand.
So one of my superstitions, and we're going to leave off religion as superstition, because I don't want to go into that argument, but one of my non-religious superstitions is that if I talk about a good thing, it'll go away, but if I talk about a bad thing, it'll happen. So I don't want to go into a lot of detail, but... So the mold people have left, and we've gotten the all clear, and so now we're waiting for more insurance people to come in so that we can make the room habitable again. And at least, no, I'm not going to say that. I got through March, and I am slowly digging myself out of the bunker I crawled into for March. And maybe things won't be as bad. I've probably said too much as is.
Quick, someone burn some sage.
Knock on all the wood. How are you doing, Weer'd?
I'm doing all right. I'm doing fine. It has been a busy day, but not a bad day, and I'm happy to be sitting down with you. And I won't lie, I've been enjoying the shenanigans.
Mm-hmm.
And we're recording this the day after Easter, and
yeah, we probably should have wished our listeners a happy Easter last week, but we are
notorious for not looking at the calendar and seeing when the show is going to drop. And so we had a good Easter.
Oh, by the way, if you're listening to this, do your taxes.
Yes.
Because tax day is the 18th. If you're a patron, you've got the entire weekend. If you're a regular listener, they're due tomorrow. Do them. Speaking of which, I don't know about you, but... You know, last year we were told the IRS is now going to start cracking down on people who earn like more than $600 or whatever from Patreon. And I kept waiting for the tax information. I kept waiting and it didn't show up. And I'm like, wondering what I'm going to do. And then I start scrolling through the email that accrued because I was like insanely busy the last half of February, and then March happened, and then I find something, I think it was in February, and they basically said, the IRS sent us an email saying they're not going to implement that for a year, so hey, you're good for now. So hooray, I'm not going to owe the government anything this year. Don't know about next year. So just something to keep in mind when you do your taxes. Or do you have people for that?
Yes, on both. My wife is both the CEO and the CFO of this household. And since my wife is very, 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 very much a corporate lady, we talk in these terms. I am the COO for anybody who cares.
Cool.
What's that?
It's a very subtle pun. You're not going to get it.
I don't get subtle puns.
No, you don't. Do I need to explain it to you, darling, or do you think you have a chance of catching it when you go back to edit?
I guarantee I'll catch it when I go back to edit.
Okay,
but I think did you just say coup?
Yes, I did.
Yes. It's chief operating officer, but either way, my wife handles the purse strings, but we also have a tax attorney that handles our extremely complicated, extremely. I don't even want to say how much of a check that we wrote to the government this year, but it's a lot. And so yeah, that's us. But so I also did include the Patreon earnings W numbers and letters form for that, because every little bit helps. So yeah, but we did that, and then.
So, hey, just because we're on the topic, once again, I'm going to remind people that Operation Blazing Sword is a 501c3 tax-deductible charity, meaning that when you donate to us, if you itemize your taxes like a grown-up, then you can deduct those donations from your taxes. And really, wouldn't you prefer to send the money where you want it to rather than giving it to the government where they can spend it wherever they want?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's too late for this year, but it's never too late to start thinking about next year. And if I recall correctly, any donation under $230 or whatever, you don't need a receipt from me, although I would imagine just hang on to your PayPal or whatever receipts. But hey, if you need them, email me and I'll be happy to mail them out to you. It's no problem.
Oh, that's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And speaking of another OBS monetary issue, is I heard somewhere that Amazon is getting rid of the Amazon Smile program.
Oh, it already had. That was like February 20th. Yeah.
Because I've still been ordering stuff on Amazon Smile, and it's still letting me do it. But it's
well. So here's the thing: I have a bookmark for Amazon Smile,
mm-hmm.
but it routes back to regular Amazon. I
think I might have noticed that as well. So that's a shame.
Yeah, that didn't make me happy. It didn't make a lot of people happy because, I don't remember the hard numbers, but it was a notable chunk of our income. Wow, I'd completely forgotten about that. I was doing something because I believe Walmart online has a very similar program, and then I got busy traveling the western parts of the states in February, and then March happened, so I've got to look into that. But it's not quite the same because people don't shop Walmart.com as ubiquitously as they do Amazon, but it's at least a little something. Yeah, I had a bit of a rant, but I've already ranted it out. Amazon is, of course, free to do whatever it wants to do, but yeah, this screws over a lot of really small things. Small organizations like OBS.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a shame. Yeah, we went to Easter. We of course had the hilarious time with my daughter. Is the childhood times are over, and so she is aware that an anthropomorphic bunny does not come and poop eggs all over the house. And so instead she went up to bed going, "Mom, make sure you hide them good this time." And then came downstairs, "Mom, I told you to hide them good." And then we laughed at the fact that my wife would walk through the room and go, "Yeah, there's still some here, and there's still some here."
Were there?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. She my not all of them were hid perfectly well, and I just told her, I said, I mean, honestly speaking, if you really wanted them hid well, I could lock them in the gun safe.
I was kind of expecting you to say something like, "We didn't hide them anywhere, but she thought we had, and that's why she couldn't find them." It's like, yeah, we hid them well, didn't we, honey?
I buried them.
It's a little bit more jerky than you'd do, but I don't know. You might.
All your eggs, they're buried under a mountain in Nevada. Figure out which one. But yeah, we had a good time. Then we went up to my parents' place in Maine and had a large, a fairly large Easter gathering. And except my aunt was not feeling well, and I had actually brought some stuff for her. So she lives in New Hampshire. So on the way home, I called her up and I'm like, "Can we stop by?" And so we stopped by. We dropped off some leftovers from the meal for her, and so that it was a good time. But I'm mostly leading into, you sent me a very, very panicked message on Saturday, and I've since heard the results, but I would like it to be further recanted.
You mean recounted? If I recant it, I take it back.
I said what I said.
It's amazing how English is your native language and you're barely literate in it.
Bad English is my native language.
Okay. So I messaged Weer'd at like 6 p.m. on Saturday saying, I need baking help, stat. Mom is baking Easter bread and the dough isn't rising. She thinks it's because the yeast was too old. So, after I explained the situation, I asked Weer'd, okay, so what can be done? And Weer'd, you were really helpful, weren't you?
Unfortunately, I mean, it's just like I was racking my brain, and unfortunately, the solution that happened didn't occur to me. But the only ways I could think about it is little those like, oh, you could buy some new yeast and mix it in with that batter, but at that point in time, you might as well just make a whole new batch. It's just one of those like, no.
And I actually offered to go to the store to get them from Mom, and she was just like, no. I don't know why she didn't want me to, but it's like, well, all right. It's 6 p.m. I'd rather eat dinner, so okay. And so trying to make her feel better, I said, well, you know what? Don't worry about it. Instead of Easter bread, it'll be Passover bread. Now, I need to explain that for a bunch of you.
They didn't have time to let the bread rise.
That's correct. And so there's the Jewish tradition that on Passover they eat unleavened bread, and leavening agent is yeast or something similar. Right, Weer'd?
Correct.
Okay. So Weer'd is so very helpful. Although you recommend blooming what's left of the yeast in sugar water to see if it foams, and I was like, what would that accomplish?
Again, it would just eliminate the variables. As chances are, this and we figured it out that it's dead or dying yeast. But if in fact the yeast is fine, maybe it's something else.
Yeah, you said that maybe the issue was adding ingredients in the wrong order or using water that wasn't hot enough. And it's like, my mom's a professional housewife. She's been making this recipe for longer than I've been alive. She will not mess this up.
Though as another professional housewife, I will note that there comes a time for everyone where you just completely screw something up. We had an issue where we buy bananas and a couple of them get eaten and most of them turn spotty, and then we make banana bread, and a whole bunch of the banana breads weren't coming out. My wife was like lecturing me, oh, you're screwing up this or you're screwing up that. So she made one, and it's like they're coming out like hockey pucks, and finally I used up the last of that baking soda and pulled out a fresh carton, and suddenly they were fine. I'm like, I think we got a bad batch of baking soda. Baking soda has been, at least in this part of the country, has been really spotty at the grocery stores. So I don't know what was going on.
So Sunday I get up, and traditionally we've got the Easter bread, which has been baked, and I carve off a piece and I have it with my coffee. And so I go over to it and I'm expecting basically matzah. And I uncover the bread and hey, it actually looks like bread. I mean, it may not have been as completely fluffy. Maybe it had a consistent, well, it was lighter than pound cake, but you get the idea. Mm-hmm. And I was like, you know what? This works. I'm happy with it. And I have a thought which I don't utter because it would probably be sacrilegious, but I think it, and it made me laugh, and I told my mom about it today, and she said Jesus would probably find it funny. And so, I'm sitting there, I'm eating this Easter bread on Easter morning with yeast that we thought had died, but still managed to rise the next day. And I'm going, would it be okay for me to say, hallelujah, the bread is risen indeed? I mean, it was kind of an Easter miracle and very thematic.
I did not see that coming. And it really is impressive.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was very similar. I most of my bread recipes, I do use the no knead method, which is you add a very, very small amount of yeast, like a quarter teaspoon, and then you add all your ingredients together and mix them up, and then just leave them out on the counter for 6 to 12 hours. I sometimes even go as long as 24, depending on what I'm making. And not only does that allow the yeast to breed up a very, very healthy colony and therefore do all the work of, a packet of yeast, which is like 2 teaspoons, but it also does all of the kneading work for you as well, because if you get flour wet for long enough, all the gluten just coalesces on its own. And I really enjoy doing it that way. And I think you might have inadvertently done it that way, where they were dead, but not all dead. And the few that were alive were fruitful and multiplied to continue on the biblical themes.
Oh, believe me, I did nothing. Remember, I'm the one who set off the fire alarm and summoned the fire department by boiling water. No, the only oven I use is the microwave. Well, and the toaster oven to a limited extent, but yeah.
But yeah, you got me thinking of pretty soon I'm going to actually start a sourdough starter, and I'm going to see if I can convert most of my recipes over to that. And so I'll be working with my own homegrown wild yeast. And I promise you, Erin, that once I have the hang of it and feel very confident, I will do a blue collar prepping post for that.
Cool.
Because come on, how much more prepping can you get than making your own yeast?
That is a good point.
Yeah, especially it made a lot of sense during COVID when yeast just completely vanished, and that is actually why I'm not doing my own sourdough right now, was because my wife noticed that there was no yeast at the store and panicked and ordered a 3-pound brick of yeast, and for whatever reason, there was something screwed up on the website, so she thought she didn't order it. So instead, she ordered a 2-pound brick of yeast, which she thought maybe that one was in stock, and both of them came. And 5 pounds of yeast is a lot of goddamn yeast.
How long is that going to last you? Because I know you do a lot of baking. I essentially, the only bread product that I do not buy, that I do not make in house is tortillas. And so yeah, all of our sandwich bread, all of our hamburger buns, hot dog buns, I make a numerous number of I make a lot of bread. I go through at least 5 pounds of flour a week, sometimes 10. And so yeah, it is a lot, and we are just getting to the end of it. I have probably about 2 of those Fleischmann's jars worth of yeast left in my freezer. So yeah, okay.
5 pounds of yeast lasts a long time. Now, granted, I do a lot of no knead recipes, so I probably would have gone through it like well by now if I was doing the standard 2 teaspoon 2-hour rise doughs. But c'est la vie.
So good luck transitioning from our whimsical holiday stories into this monstrosity.
Yeah, let's just grind those gears. So this was a news story that I heard about and felt that I needed to talk about that because of course last show we were talking extensively about the mass shooting in Tennessee that ended up killing 3 children and 3 staff members of the school and which was unfortunate. And also the shooter was killed by the police. Stop moving, which was, I'm not shedding any tears on that one. And of course the news is making a big deal and we need to ban guns and we need to do all of this and do all of that. And this is only something that happens in America. And meanwhile, in Brazil, a absolute piece of garbage went into a daycare and killed 3 children and 4 adults, 3 children dead, 4 others injured. And this person only used an axe. And so I really wanted to put that in as a contrast of while these people talk about, oh, we need to ban assault weapons. Oh, we need to ban assault pistols, with which I saw one article referring to the Kel-Tec used by the killer on there. And, these are, the idea that somehow banning tools is going to affect murderous, awful people. This is about as telling as you could be, is because this guy's got an axe, and we've been digging those out of archaeological sites for like 1 million years now.
Yeah, I don't really have much to add other than to reiterate it's not the tool, it's the person behind it. Hey, actually, here's an analogy that will fit our previous Easter theme, talking about the Bible. A rock in the wrong hand murdered Abel. A rock in the right hand killed Goliath in defense of Israel. It's not the tool, it's the person behind it.
Yep, and in the case of the Nashville shooting, people are fixated on the AR, though. As far as I know, the killer didn't use it that much. They mostly used the Kel-Tec, but they did have an AR-15 pistol with them, and guess what? There was also an AR with the police, and this killer cowardly and murderously killed women and children, and the police with great bravery used an AR-15 to put this horrible creature down. So it's the tools are the tools themselves are just tools, and this is definitely a software issue, not a hardware issue.
Mm-hmm. So on to some better news. Last week we talked about the California handgun roster. Mm-hmm. And now it seems that something is going on with the Massachusetts handgun roster. Now, Weer'd, you live in Massachusetts.
I sure do.
So, you can go into more detail on this. Looking at so I'm reading an article that's probably very biased. And the way the article reads, it sounds like Massachusetts was being conscientious of its citizens and stating that handguns which did not have certain safe qualifications, like, if it wasn't made from proper materials, or if it didn't have a drop safe, or
loaded chamber
not
indicator.
be prone to Well, I didn't see that.
That is the big issues on it is the materials that the gun's made of. Essentially, any of your zinc guns are not allowed to be sold in Massachusetts.
Yeah, see, I thought that they were going for a high point ban without saying high point.
Mm-hmm. High Point,
okay.
Raven, Lorson, all the Rings of Fire. Yeah.
I do have to question not be prone to malfunctions like repeated firing from a single trigger pull or exploding. I mean, I know what they mean, but are they referencing a particular brand here?
Honestly speaking, I don't even know where that came from, or if that's just propaganda fed by the office that's trying to promote this as an actual safety roster rather than an industry shakedown and a let's keep poor people from owning guns.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, that's really what the article seems to be, that Massachusetts is looking out and doing quality control for its citizens, and now people are suing to have this overturned. And I figured that there's more to it than that. And so what with you being a Massachusetts resident and a pistol aficionado, you would have more info on this because you have skin in the game. So take it away.
Yeah, essentially it is just a case, and I really haven't been following it this much. I just was
what?
There are other people looking at it, and I'm gonna know when it passes and it's going through. But essentially, the case is saying, again, we've got the handgun roster that essentially has all these mandatory safety features, things like loaded chamber indicators, trigger weight is a big one. You have to have at least a 10-pound trigger pull weight on a gun, or the firearm needs to have a manual safety.
See, that was conveniently left out of the article.
Yeah. I mean, there's just a bunch of things. Melting point of the metal components is part of it. Drop safety is another factor. And then on top of that, it is completely arbitrary. You can pass every single one of the tests, such as Glock did, and every single Glock pistol ever made is on the Massachusetts approved safety roster. And you go into a gun shop and you won't see a single one unless it's old and in the used rack, because guess what? The Attorney General in their super secret list said that no, you can't sell Glocks. And there's probably a bunch of other guns that also can't be sold. But essentially, this was an older case that was going through, and then a certain little kiss of sunshine hit us called NYSERPA versus Bruin, and this case has gotten kicked back for reevaluation using the Bruin test, of which in a just world it wouldn't survive, but then again, the Massachusetts Supreme Court has done some really, really wonky stuff, such as Warman versus Healy, where essentially they said, yeah, there's no right to own an AR-15 because it's a military weapon, or I don't even remember what the exact wording of that complete garbage case ruling was. But the big thing that I'm excited about is that I don't think Massachusetts is going to let this go. I don't think they're going to allow it to go through. So I think it's going to end up getting shut down. It's going to go out for appeal, and it's going to go to the Supreme Court. At the same time, the California one is going, and I'm hoping they're going to bundle the two of them together, so that all of the pro Second Amendment voices can pool together their resources and argue against a wider range of safety rosters. Because of course, there's always the opportunity that it might just say, "Oh, California's microstamping rule is unconstitutional, and therefore, all these roster rules and goofiness that, again, just like California, Massachusetts police absolutely carry off roster guns, and they can buy off roster guns on department letterhead. And so, yeah, these people who carry guns for a living are allowed to carry quote unquote unsafe firearms. So yeah, I'm hoping these will get bundled together in front of the Supreme Court, and then this will just get completely smacked down in such a way that also the people of Maryland, and I'm trying to remember I think there's one other state that has a roster, will get smacked down. And then my bank account is going to die because suddenly all of the handguns in the world will suddenly become available to me. And
Maryland and the District of Columbia.
Okay. Yep. And so, yeah, hopefully that will all be gone, and then we can enjoy all of the handguns that are available to us that are free and clear and legal to Americans like Erin, who lives in Florida. So one other current event I wanted to talk about was the anti-gun protest and the political fallout in Tennessee. I could read some articles and butcher the timeline of events, or I could ask a resident who's following the case much more closely to give us a recap.
Welcome to Oddball's Corner Pocket. Longtime listeners of the show probably know that I live in the Nashville area, which means that I've been witness to a lot of the reaction to the Covenant School shooting back in March. This includes the protests by the usual groups. Of course, if you've been paying attention to the news, things took a bit of an unusual twist this time around. This time, 3 of the state House representatives decided to join in on the protests and bump things up a level. Specifically, these representatives are Justin Jones of Nashville, Justin J. Pearson of Memphis, and Gloria Johnson of Knoxville. To be clear, I have no issues with politicians getting involved in protests. If they want to stand on the steps of the Capitol and chant along or lead protesters, that is their First Amendment right, and they should feel free to do so. If they want to pontificate in the chambers when recognized, that's kind of what politicians do. If they want to submit bills in line with their beliefs and that of their constituents, well, that's their job. These three decided that that wasn't enough. A couple weeks ago, they decided that the proper action was to storm the well of the House, also known as the floor with the podium at the center of the chambers, pull out a protest sign and megaphone, and lead protesters in the gallery in protest chants. The leader of the House quickly called for recess, and these three led the crowd in chanting for close to an hour. By the way, they described it as them occupying the House floor. That is their words, not mine. Of course, given the current political climate, this was not something that was going to be tolerated by the House leadership. In fact, the leadership decided that they had knowingly and intentionally broken multiple long-standing rules of the House and wrote up bills to expel them from their seats. The following week, they expelled Mr. Jones and Mr. Pearson, but the votes were only one vote shy of kicking Mrs. Johnson out. Of course, the media has painted this as them getting kicked out because they were anti-gun or Democrat, and the fact that the two that were kicked out were black men, while the one that was allowed to stay was a white woman, is a sure sign of racism. Yeah, not so much. The two that got kicked out were freshmen, and had both earned reputations of being troublemakers in their short tenures in their offices. I watched some of their testimonies while their fates were being decided, and both continued to bang on the anti-gun message, be out of order, talk trash about other members of the House, and ignore the subject at hand. Mrs. Johnson, on the other hand, actually addressed the charges leveled against her, and has been in office since 2018, and spent a brief time in office between 2014 and 2016 before that. Oh, and Mr. Jones and Mr. Pearson were the ones with the sign and the megaphone, while Mrs. Johnson was just standing next to them and sort of chanting along and honestly looking like she wasn't real sure what she was doing. Of course, the respective city councils get to choose their replacements, and nothing says that they can't just send them back to retake their seats, which both Nashville and Memphis are talking about doing. So this will probably do nothing but elevate them as heroes in the eyes of their supporters and give the antis reasons to beat the drums more. Good job. Well, I hope that this at least straightens this out for you. Until next time, have a good one, and I think I might go get a drink.
As Oddball predicted in his comment, and while he was uploading the post, Nashville has reappointed Justin Jones to the House, and likely by the time you're hearing this, probably Mr. Pearson will also be back in his seat. And unfortunately, because of how this all went down and the nature of how the political players have been playing on this, nothing will be learned from this event.
I mean, I suppose this was like censuring them with extra steps.
Yeah, but what's the bottom line? I don't know if it's going to leave any
a virtue signal.
What's that?
A virtue signal?
Yeah. And the cool thing about the virtue signals is if you ignore them, they go away. So yeah, either way, this is, I mean, it was a tasteless move. They should have known better. They didn't know better, and they'll continue not to know better. Lessons for the pro-gun people: don't do this. Behave yourself. It will always make things look better on your end. Not that matters how the media will report on it.
So anyone who knows me knows I love my Keltec Sub 2000, but it turns out that my venerable subby has competition from Smith & Wesson. David is here to talk about the Smith & Wesson M&P FPC.
Hi, and welcome to Gun Lovers and Other Strangers. Earlier this year, I heard rumblings that Smith & Wesson was coming out with a new pistol caliber carbine. As a fan of both the company and that platform, I was intrigued and eager to hear more. So in this segment, I'd like to talk about the new Smith & Wesson M&P FPC, or Folding Pistol Carbine. The FPC was released to the world in late February of this year. My interest was certainly piqued, especially after I saw Jerry Miculek's video. Two other contributing factors to my interest in this new product were Smith & Wesson's decision to move most of their production to a town about an hour away from where I live, and the FPC takes M&P 2.0 magazines. As I carry this pistol every day, it meant I wouldn't have to buy a bunch of new magazines. Eventually, we received 2 FPCs at the gun shop where I work. However, they both sold the same day they were received. Not very surprising, really. So I had to wait for the next shipment to arrive. Thankfully, that didn't take long, and the manager put one aside for me. All told, the packaging and included components were very nice. Everything comes in a good quality padded case with handles and an attachable shoulder strap. In addition to the carbine, also in the case are 1 17-round and 2 23-round magazines, 4 grip back straps, small, medium, large, and extra large, a chamber flag, federally mandated lock, manual, and other paperwork. Like the Keltec Sub 2000, the Smith & Wesson FPC folds in half for storage and transport. However, the FPC folds to the side instead of over the top. While folding to the side does make for a slightly wider package than the Keltec, it also means any optic mounted on the rail doesn't need to be removed or swung out of the way for storage. With the rail and barrel maintaining their positions relative to one another, zero is unlikely to be disturbed. Speaking of storage, the buttstock incorporates slots for 2 magazines, but brings up some of my only criticisms of the FPC. The magazines are stored feedlips to the rear and bullets pointed down, which means quick reloading will require some practice to properly reorient the magazines. My other issue with the magazine stowage is there are 2 release buttons, and the left button is pushed for the right magazine and vice versa. Again, a training issue, but in my opinion not ideal. I'm sure there will be aftermarket options for stocks available soon. 3D printer files, if nothing else. Unlocking the FPC to fold in half is accomplished by a release lever just ahead of the ejection port. This is pushed forward, unlocking an internal wedge, releasing the barrel assembly to swing to the left. When completely folded, one wing of the charging handle locks into a slot on the forend securely. This can readily be pulled apart, however it's better to slightly retract the charging handle first. While the folding system seems quite secure, I'm curious how it will hold up long term as both sides of the mechanism, both folded and unfolded, are made of some sort of plastic. Out of curiosity, I tried manipulating the mechanism in several different configurations. With a loaded magazine and an empty chamber, the FPC will fold normally. While the breech face is exposed, the magazine is protected by the bolt when it's forward. If there's a round in the chamber, the folding mechanism can't operate. The extractor hook on the bolt engaging with the case rim prevents the barrel from moving while the round's in the chamber. When completely folded, the forend slot prevents the charging handle from being fully retracted. If partially folded, a round can be fed from the magazine, but only being held by the extractor on one side and otherwise unsupported, it falls out the front of the receiver. Overall, a well thought out system. In order to follow proper range etiquette, if I was at a public range and the FPC was in its folded configuration, I'd point the muzzle down range and fold the receiver back towards me. Once I got my new purchase home, I gave it a quick teardown and cleaning. While I found disassembly slightly overcomplicated in some aspects, it wasn't bad at all and revealed some interesting design features. The forend, though in appearance standard AR style, is actually unique and dedicated to the FPC design. I would have preferred a standard free float style for easier customization with existing parts, but that would have required a redesign of the barrel mount, so I understand why it was done this way. Removing the buttstock is easy enough, and it has an internal spring whose purpose seems to be applying pressure to the release lever to keep it from bouncing loose when shooting. The recoil tube plug and retaining pin can both be installed in either direction, which is a nice simplifying touch. Once the recoil spring is removed, the bolt can be pulled out the back of the receiver tube. revealing the bolt is actually two parts held together by a dovetail-type interface. This should make it easier to produce versions of the FPC in other chamberings, as long as the overall length of any other cartridges aren't too big for the 9mm sized magazines. As I mentioned in my segment for ACP episode 199, the bolt and buffer weight in a 9mm pistol caliber carbine should total at least 22 ounces. Heavier isn't a problem. With the FPC, the carrier alone is nearly 21 ounces, and with the bolt added, it weighs in at 26.5 ounces, making for a soft shooting package. Speaking of shooting, I threw a no-name red dot I had lying around on it for testing, and after sighting in, it was quite accurate at 10 yards on a reduced-scale silhouette target. I was able to nibble around the edges of the grouping and trim off scraps of target as I went. Recoil was, as expected, mild, and brass was ejected in a pretty small area. I was actually able to recover all 50 cases fairly quickly. Usually I lose at least one to the brass fairy. Loading was quick and easy since the magazine goes where it belongs for a pistol caliber carbine, in the grip. And the rear-mounted Stingray-shaped charging handle is ambidextrous. In fact, the only control that isn't accessible to either hand, or, like the magazine release, easily reversible, is the crossbolt safety forward of the trigger guard. As a left-handed shooter, I'm used to this issue, though I would have preferred a different solution. I found the carbine to be nicely balanced, though I think it would be a bit butt-heavy with two loaded 23-round magazines stored in the stock. All told, I'm quite happy with my purchase, and with an MSRP only about $80 more than a base model sub-2000, Kel-Tec probably needs to keep an eye on their heels.
Listen to me, small visitor. I can explain how you got here.
That about wraps up this segment. If you have any questions for me or suggestions for future segments or a comment on a past segment, please post them on the Assorted Calibers Podcast Facebook or MeWe pages, and Erin or Weer'd will make sure I see them. I'm also a contributor on the Blue Collar Prepping blog, which can be found at bluecollarprepping.blogspot.com. We're always looking for people interested in submitting posts to the blog, so please check out the site. Finally, I'm a published author, and books with my stories can be found on Amazon under the name Brena Bock. That's BrenaBock. I'm also in anthologies published under my actual name. Look for David Bock on Amazon, just not the guy who writes the computer books. That's all for now. Thanks for listening. I'm David, and this is Gun Lovers and Other Strangers.
So, Erin, is your Kel-Tec in danger? Are you seeing greener grass on the other side of the fence?
You mean, am I going to get an FPC?
Yes.
No, because I'm poor. And I'm very happy with my subby. I have a Gen 1, and I tricked it out, and by about the time I had finished tricking it out, they came out with the Gen 2, which had more or less all of the same trick outs that I'd done on it. And it was like, son of a bitch. So, yeah, I'm hearing a lot of people talking about how this is a sub-2000 killer. And, well, okay, first of all, I do want to point out that it's taken 22 years for a firearms manufacturer to come out with a pistol caliber carbine that can compete with the sub-2000. Now, yes, I am aware of the existence of the Beretta CX4 Storm, and I am aware of the Ruger pistol caliber carbine, but they are much more expensive, and the Beretta doesn't even break down. The Ruger at least disassembles like a hunting rifle. You can you physically separate it into two parts. You take off the barrel from the receiver, but yeah, the Beretta is like, it MSRP for like $900. And Oddball has one. It's a very nice gun. I enjoyed shooting it. We know that I'm a cheap ass, and I wouldn't pay that much. Even though I know that gun store prices are like $50 to $100 less, it's way too much. Mm-hmm. I have no experience with the Ruger PC carbine, but it's like close to $800. It's still pretty expensive, and it takes proprietary Ruger magazines. Last I checked.
I'm trying to remember if I think you can switch. It comes to the factory setup to take Ruger SR magazines, which so there's a whole lineage there of different guns that run on it. But I believe you can convert it to Glock mags.
Okay, well, that is something in its favor. But when you look at the M&P, or I should say the FPC, which is either folding or foldable pistol carbine, carbine, carbine. We'll just get that out of the way. Its MSRP is $660, and the sub 2000, they give a helpful range somewhere between $578 to $621, so it's around $600. And so, the FPC is only about $60 more MSRP, and it's got all the features that the Gen 1 should have had. But the thing is, well, I like Kel-Tec. Kel-Tec has a lot of good ideas, but they're not very good on the production side of things. And I've heard that it is nearly impossible to get a hold of a sub 2000 these days simply because of their production backlog. So, yeah, the sub 2000 should feel threatened, not because the FPC is a superior product, and it may be, I don't know, I have no experience with it. Actually, I'm going to meet up with David when we go to LibertyCon in Chattanooga this summer, and I'm bringing my subby and he's bringing his FPC, and we're going to trade off and we're going to shoot them. But really, it's because you can't buy a sub 2000. You can buy an FPC. And so that's the real threat. So Kel-Tec really needs to unfornicate itself, or else it's going to find that Smith & Wesson has taken over its market share.
I mean, that is really a big issue, is that the sub 2000 has been a perfectly legal firearm in Massachusetts. I mean, at least up until the Mara Healy edict. I have no idea if suddenly it became an assault weapon with her weird, interpretation of the written law, but I've never actually seen one in a gun shop to even contemplate whether or not I needed one. So yeah, they're kind of hen's teeth. But I will note that since you're talking about price, Kel-Tec has put out a $100 rebate if you're buying a new sub 2000. So if you can find one, you can send in your proof of purchase. Is it? Didn't actually read over the full thing, but essentially there's a link in the show notes, and you can send it in, and Kel-Tec will send you $100 check. So that really sweetens the deal.
So I mean, at least they're paying attention.
Yeah, they're cool guns. Yeah, so long as you're perfectly fine with using the iron sights. I mean, yeah, the cool thing about the Smith & Wesson is it folds the other way so that you can have an optic on the top rail, and it won't hinder the folding.
Well, I mean, there are workarounds for that with the subby. I mean, they're not as good. Well, they definitely weren't as good for the first gen. I think for the second gen, they've got something where they can get the rail to it rotates about 45 degrees so that you can then fold it, and then the optic is sort of resting on the buffer tube. But yeah, it's still not ideal for folding. For me, the foldability of the sub 2000 really is a novelty. I didn't buy it for that. If my sub 2000 was unable to fold, I would still be perfectly happy with it. And really, the only time I fold it is when I'm taking it to the range. The rest of the time, it stays unlocked. So it's not a big deal for me, and I don't know how big of a deal it is for other people. I do really like, because I watched the same Jerry Miculek video, I do really like the way it folds. And I like the way that, yeah, it'll fold, and your optic's not going to lose zero. That's neat. It is a thicker package, but I think what we are really seeing here, it isn't a battle between foldable carbines. It's a battle between affordable carbines. And when there's only a $60 difference, and the slightly more expensive one you can find and the other one you can't, that's really compelling. So I look forward to testing David's FPC. David looks forward to testing my subby. I get the feeling that we're both going to like both of them, and it'll just sort of be like the difference between Coke and Pepsi.
Yeah. I'm personally looking forward to caliber conversions into hipster calibers, because I have a super duper soft spot for pistol caliber carbines in either 10 millimeter or 357 SIG, because those cartridges turn into really within striking distance of an intermediate rifle cartridge once they get out of a longer barrel.
So Weer'd, did you know that High Point makes a 10 millimeter carbine?
Yes. Yes. They have the carbine. Yeah, they make it. They just made a pistol, but they've had the carbine for a couple of years now.
Yeah. So if you have a soft spot for one, why don't you own one yet?
I haven't seen one in the shops, even though I should be able to get one in Massachusetts, and I don't want to order one with ask the local gun shop, because then they'll know what I want. It's like asking the lady behind the counter for the condoms.
Okay.
But yeah, no, the High Point 10 millimeter carbine is absolutely something that's been on my radar, because yeah, that is a fun, inexpensive gun, and then you can stuff super expensive ammo into it.
Yeah, I think I've said before, I mean, I know I've said it before, I just don't know if I've said it here, that the High Point carbine is the modern day Mosin Nagant, in that, yeah, it's bulky and it's not very attractive, and you can get one for not a lot of money, but it works.
Yeah.
And there's a lot to be said for a self-defense long gun that is affordable and works.
Mm-hmm. And then when you factor in 10 millimeter, yes, the ammo's expensive, but boy, you go check out Ballistics by the Inch and look to see what 10 millimeters doing coming out of a 16-inch barrel. It is very impressive. There's a lot of energy that's not being utilized in a 4 or 5 inch barrel gun. So now to close out the show, in a vein very similar to a Weer'd audio fisk, Sean Sorrentino brings us an anti-gun talking point and a few rebuttals to combat it.
There's something that's been burning my ass for a long time now, and I'm finally figuring out how to put it into words. We've all heard it many times before. After every mass public shooting, the gun grabbers leap to demand all kinds of restrictions on your and my rights. We tell them, we didn't do it. It won't work. Stop punishing us. So they hit us with this.
And if you're about to argue that gun control wouldn't stop this, then fine. But I better quickly hear an argument for what solution will.
Hold up a second. Who the f*** are you to make this my problem? But we're dumb. We fall for the same trick over and over. We offer what we consider reasonable solutions. Punish violent criminals, protect children at school with actual security, and end fake gun-free zones that only serve to disarm the law-abiding so they can be easily slaughtered. We fall for the trick. We act like the gun grabbers are actually looking for workable solutions. They aren't looking for solutions. They're looking to ban guns. Stop treating these people as if they're acting in good faith. They're not asking for you to collaborate on solutions. They're asking for you to submit to their attacks on your civil rights. But Sean, don't you want to solve this problem? Sure. But I'm neither a school guard nor a police officer. I'm not a social worker, a parent, a teacher, or anyone else who has any responsibility to protect school kids or the general public. It's not my problem. I think that as cold and as callous as it sounds, it's time for gun owners to learn the subtle art of not giving a fuck. Recently, I listened to a podcast where a feminist talked about the issues of feminists calling for censorship of online pornography. She was against the censorship not because she was particularly enamored of internet porn, but because she felt that censorship of the internet would lead to much worse outcomes than what she considered the obvious and serious damage porn was doing to children. She said something that resonated with me because it's exactly how I feel about the idiots who are pushing gun control as their preferred solution to public mass murder.
In this case, I only know what I firmly oppose. I don't know how to deal with it. I don't know how to deal with it technologically. I don't know how to deal with it socially. It's a huge problem. But Not knowing a good solution for it doesn't mean that I have to embrace a bad solution, which in my view is not a solution at all.
I haven't the slightest idea what to do about that 1 in a million whack job who decides that his best solution to the fact that he's a complete loser is to murder random innocent people. I can't jam my head far enough up my own ass to see things from his warped perspective. I'm not going to fool myself that I could possibly imagine what this loser's motivations are so that I could solve the problem before it starts. But I will carry a gun so that if I happen to end up in this asshole's blast zone, I at least have a fighting chance. But I'm not a cop. I'm not a teacher. I'm not a school administrator. I'm not a social worker. I am in no way responsible for this shitty problem. I'll be damned if I let anyone make it my problem simply because I want to exercise my civil rights. I didn't cause the problem. I didn't harm anyone. My owning firearms doesn't increase the problem. So please, strongly consider getting off my dick about it.
So another talking point that Sean missed out on is, I know that gun law XYZ, you name it, you've heard the Weer'd audio fisks, you've seen me proving it, but they don't work. So we should really stop trying to use them. Like, it's all well and good on them crowing for a solution, but it's not like they're calling for a solution either. They're saying what they're calling for is a solution, but it's proven not to work. So really what they're just doing is they're just using gun violence and suicide deaths as a mean to justify their gun control agenda. And with that, it is time to thank our listeners, each and every one of you. Thank you so much for tuning into the Assorted Calibers podcast, and a very special thanks to all our supporters on Patreon. To become a Patreon patron, go to patreon.com/Assorted Calibers podcast to sign up. Patrons get an early release of the podcast, plus bonus content like the hilarious blooper reels, the ACP film track, and the ACP mag dump.
Also, please remember to rate us on Apple Podcasts, subscribe to us on the platform of your choice, and share the show with your friends, both online and off.
You can get more from me at my blog, which is weerdworlds.com. That's WEERD world.com. And hear me weekly on Handgun Radio on the Firearms Radio Network.
And you can get more from me at linktree/Erin Paulette. That's linktree.ee/Erin Paulette, all one word.
And thanks to Nate Spencer for our music.
So I like 9mm, and I've got a really fun carbine that shoots it. And Weer'd Beard loves 10mm and hasn't gotten off his butt to buy a carbine that shoots it. One of us is smart and the other one of us isn't, and so is our podcast. Good night, everyone.
I have several rifles at 308. Good night, everyone.